And welcome back to Wake Up America. I'm Alex Kramer alongside Christina Thompson. Well, our nation is now experiencing a disturbing rise in city crime and homelessness, and with it, crimes related to mental health issues as well.
And joining us now to talk about it, former NYC mayoral candidate and founder of the Guardian Angels, Curtis Sliwa, and veteran suburban police officer and spokesperson for the National Police Association, Sergeant Betsy Brentner-Smith. Everyone, good morning. How are you guys?
Good morning.
All right, well, Curtis, let me start with you.
I've had much better days. This city is in a mess.
Yes, that's why I want to start with you, Curtis. Now, New York just experienced another heinous crime as a man randomly pushed a woman to her death on a subway track. I feel like we just keep seeing these stories every single day coming out of New York City. What do you attribute this rise in crime to?
Oh, look at this. Then we have our new mayor, Eric Adams, say, oh, it's all perception. Crime is actually down in the subway. I'm down in the subway every day. What is he talking about? That's this political mumbo jumbo. Two reasons. How'd that no bail situation work, huh? And the other thing is defunding the police, not just in New York, all across America. How did that work? What are we going to give them 3 strikes and then they're out? They have to amend this now, or it's going to continue to get worse and worse and worse.
Sergeant Smith, this rise in crime, it's not isolated just to New York. It's certainly an issue in Chicago, LA. Stories we're very interested in. I know we're going to start later in our shows talking about that poor 24-year-old woman who was working and was stabbed to death in LA. I mean, these crimes are heinous. They're disgusting. They're happening all over the country. People are losing their lives. Why are we seeing these crime waves hitting our cities, and why aren't our local politicians doing anything about it?
Well, we've had 20 months of exactly what Curtis says, defunding the police, vilifying the police, lying about the police, and saying that we are the problem. The police are not the problem. But in addition to vilifying law enforcement, we've got bail reform. We've got early release from prison. We've got 100,000 police officers that are no longer working the streets. So what we have got to do is go back to law and order policies and back to supporting law enforcement. And when we talk about the homeless, we've got to go back to that broken windows theory that saved New York back in the 90s and get back to enforcing those laws like no camping, no public drug use, and getting those people the help that they need, not just letting them run free to do horrible things like we just saw in New York and in Los Angeles.
Exactly. Curtis, the statistics, they're staggering. Crime is 25% higher in New York than it was a year ago. Hate crimes up over 90%. It's exactly why you started the Guardian Angels so many years ago. But did you ever expect it to come full circle like this?
No. We had been down in the belly of the beast for years. And then all of a sudden, when Rudy Giuliani got elected mayor in 1993, we saw the turnaround and the continued improvement. And then we had Mayor de Blasio, who single-handedly took a Miley Cyrus wrecking ball to the city that we love. And if we don't put the brakes on quick, this is how people are going to react. Allied Valentines, we're packing up. We're heading down to Georgia and Florida, North Carolina, Virginia, Tennessee, Texas. You're seeing this already. Massive exodus out of California. Massive exodus out of Illinois, massive exodus out of New York and New Jersey. And the reason? Crime. People do not want to deal with the reality of crime. They're not going to wait for politicians. There are no messiahs out there. So they're packing up and heading out. And there goes your tax base. And there goes all your social services. There goes your additional education funds. Look, Martin Luther King Day was yesterday. When he was in Chicago in the 60s, one of his observations was, I can't understand how white and black people here are so calloused and indifferent to the killing of young black youth by other young black youth. That was in the 60s. We haven't been able to address that problem in Chicago, other cities since.
Sergeant Smith, in Chicago, violent crime up in a city that's way beyond the national average. Gun violence off the charts. Some neighborhoods are seeing over 100% increase in fatal shootings. Is there a rational reason for this? Can we just point to COVID, or is it something more?
No, like Mayor Lightfoot says, it's not COVID, even though she keeps trying to blame that. What we have is a state's attorney, Kim Foxx, in Cook County, Illinois, who rarely prosecutes gun crime, does a terrible job of even bringing cases to trial. They have no bail, no cash bail. Everybody is back out on the street right away to reoffend. And again, Curtis is right. Who's mostly dying on the streets of Chicago? African Americans. Who's doing most of the homicides? African Americans. And yet somehow the Chicago Police Department has been vilified by their mayor, saying that the police are the problem. We have got to stop that false narrative that somehow American law enforcement is killing African Americans and other people of color. The Chicago Police Department has thousands of fantastic police officers. We need to let them do their job. And then Kim Foxx needs to prosecute those cases that those officers bring to her.
All right, now I want to bring in the third person in this panel to talk about the mental health side of all of this. Clinical psychologist Dr. Katherine Kuhlman. And Dr. Kuhlman, I want to go back to that New York subway incident. And the man claimed to be God. And his family says he does suffer from schizophrenia. And research suggests that patients with mental illness may actually be more prone to violence. So, what psychiatric conditions increase a person's risk of committing a crime?
Well, this is a double-edged sword. People with mental health conditions, by and large, are more likely to be victims of violence rather than to perpetrate. But there are certain mental health problems where an individual is more likely than others to commit violence. And as you mentioned, schizophrenia is one of them, especially if they're experiencing what we call command hallucinations, which is basically voices telling them to do something, whether that's kill somebody else, kill themselves, or in this guy's case, right, these delusions of grandeur where he believed that he's God. You'll also see this in people who are obviously abusing drugs or disorders that increase impulse control problems like bipolar disorders. And so these individuals may be more likely to commit crimes simply because of some of the mental health factors, but also because they're lacking a lot of the resources and protective factors that many of us have.
Dr. Kuhlman, we just talked about how the family of this man said that they knew he suffered from mental health issues. Why wasn't he receiving help? What should family members do? What should people in the community do if they know someone who is suffering from different psychological conditions like this that they fear might hurt someone else?
Well, the thing is that the resources are there, especially as we've been talking about here with the homeless population. There are so many resources in large cities with community mental health centers, with homeless shelters that provide mental health services, and lots of free resources. The problem is that people will not get help if they don't want it themselves. And if somebody does not believe that they have a problem, or they don't believe that they're dangerous and they're lacking that awareness and insight, they're not going to receive services. And the only way that they're going to be forced to is if they are prosecuted for a crime, or it is determined that they are a harm to self or others, and then they can be committed or be under a mental health certification where they're essentially forced to medication and treatment.
All right. Yeah, this was a great discussion, you three. Thank you so much, Curtis Sliwa, Sergeant Betsy Brantner Smith, and Dr. Katherine Kuhlman. Thank you so much for coming on this morning.
Thank
Good
you.
one.